Joey Clark.
Welcome back to News and Views in the afternoon, or as we're calling this thing online, Joey Clark Live. 272-9228 if you want to line up your calls. We only have 4 working lines, so you better get in line. And as promised, right across the desk from me here in the studio, we have the Mayor of Montgomery, Mayor Stephen Reed. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I want everybody to see this this water that you have. This
Liquid Death?
This is not, your Evian. This isn't your...
I like Fiji. I like Evian. I like Liquid Death.
Liquid Death. I mean, that's a heck of a name.
Kills your thirst.
It kills your thirst.
They don't even pay me to say that.
That's great. I'm just saying, I haven't had anything that, in a can this big probably about 25 years.
That's wise on your part.
Probably about 30 years now. I'm really dating myself. I guess I am old, but that was back in the days of drinking things that probably tasted like Liquid Death. But
yeah,
we're not just
like the Blue Bull, like
water.
little Schlitz or something. Yeah, no, we don't need any of that. So many questions, and so where I wanted
I'll try to be quick.
Well, because where I wanted to start, and the whole show we've pretty much been talking about the crime issue.
Yeah,
is first I want to ask what happened with the old chief, with Chief Albert, and then how is the search for a new chief going?
We want to start crime. We want to start personnel.
I think the personnel, in my mind, is a key part of the issue. But there are a lot of things we could get into, and it's multifaceted.
So really, with Chief Albert, man, that's been a while. We did an internal investigation, and he decided to resign from that. There are allegations made, some substantiated, some weren't. And he decided that it was best to resign, and we accepted his resignation.
Were you, because I asked you in January if you were happy with his performance then, but what I'm wondering, and kind of I was laying it out earlier in the show, is there's law and order. So you have the law side, and there's a lot that can be done with the law, especially with the state legislature and what you and the council can do.
Yeah.
But I think about the order part, where you can pass all the laws you want if you don't have an effective force that can enforce those things and provide a deterrent and order and peace on the streets. It really ends up being an issue, and I know we're not unique, but the low force levels make me wonder what's going on. Why can't we hire more police, even with the pay raises some time ago and even these recent?
Yeah. So I think we've got to understand that in the larger environment, police shortages are down across the board, right? And so there are more of us looking for police, more of us be in towns and cities, and there are people who are going into public safety, into police work. So, you kind of get to a level where you're cannibalizing one another. You're picking from this law enforcement agency, this law enforcement agency is picking from another one, and it's kind of a situation like that. So whether or not it's in the state, where I meet with the mayors of the 10 largest cities in our state quarterly, all the major cities have shortages there. Or nationally, where I serve on the National League of Cities Public Safety Committee, where we see it even with mayors that are former police chiefs from California to Florida. It's a huge challenge because a lot of young people aren't going to the profession, and we all saw a tremendous drop in retirements after 2020, after the George Floyd incident. So you kind of take that in the last 3 or 4 years, and our recruiting just has not kept up in that pipeline with those that we saw leaving. And I think also part of it is when you're in police work, the culture is very important, as it is in any work environment. And we have to recognize that police are under a lot of mental stress, a lot of physical stress, yes, but mental stress for sure. And I don't know that we were as responsive to that as quickly as we should have been, nor have we been as aggressive in rolling out incentives for recruits to come here in our effort to try to replenish the pipeline in our police department.
And you mentioned George Floyd, and I think there is sort of as close as you can get to universal in this country these days, agreement that something changed.
Oh, no question.
After that. So I'm more thinking now, trying to dig into why. And I'll just put the nub of it out in my humble opinion. I think there is, even well-intentioned goals, the goal to stop, say, police brutality and to stop mass incarceration seems to butt heads with the goal of being tough on crime.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way I think of, say, the Me Too movement, and you saw this hashtags believe all women, and you're like, well, come on, there are going to be some women that lie, but it's a corrective to all the stuff that was going on before. So I'm wondering, is there at times a divide there that these two goals don't intersect as well as we would like them to?
Yeah, but I think it's up to us in leadership to try to make that happen, whether it's in the corporate space or any area. I mean, society changes, it evolves, and culture dictates that. And so, what was acceptable 5, 10 years ago may not be. Some things that weren't 5 or 10 years ago now are. So you have to be able to find that middle ground where that's concerned. And that's what you're tasked to do in leadership. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in education, doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit or if you're in corporate, much less government. You've got to be able to adapt to the times, and you got to be able to make sure you're providing the type of culture and workplace setting where people can thrive professionally and not feel any type of way personally. And that doesn't matter what department you're in, whether it's city, Montgomery. And it shouldn't matter whether or not you're working in government, in the public sector, private sector. That should be the goal of all of us.
I started with the question about the former chief because I was wondering, have we continued to not keep up with officers? We continue to be at low levels. I've seen the number 220. I've seen 230 something.
Those numbers are false. Those numbers aren't.
What's the number?
Right. The number is higher than that. It's significantly higher than that.
Like how much?
Like a good bit. I'll tell you, and I don't like getting into numbers. I don't like telling the bad guys where we are and how many we have. I've never liked that. I've never thought that was appropriate for people to say in open council meetings, period.
How close are we to, say, 490, 500?
Oh, we're nowhere near that.
Okay.
But we haven't been near that in some time, right? But we aren't where I'd like to be from my standpoint. We are south of 325.
Okay.
But we're much
north of 220.
Yeah, we're much further north than that.
Okay.
Unless there's been a mass walkout the last 48 hours that I don't know about.
Okay.
All right. So
let's hope not.
Yeah. So from our standpoint, I think that again, adjusting to the times and making sure that we are refilling that pipeline, if you will, was not an area that we were as aggressive in as we should be. What we're talking about now, I think, is a culmination of a lot of things, not just what happened in 2020. It's other things. Again, people are finding other lines of work less stressful.
Yeah.
Lines of work, better working hours, to be honest with you, better quality of life. And there are a lot of jobs out there. So there are people who are not just leaving for other law enforcement jobs. There are people who are getting out of the career itself. So we have to adjust to that, and that's going to be done through technology. So it doesn't matter if I talk to Eric Adams in New York, or if I talk to, mayor down in Florida, Jane Castor in Tampa. It doesn't matter. People who've been in policing who are now mayors just talk about how different it is now versus what it was 10, 20 years ago, much less when they were young and coming onto the force.
So in terms of the internal culture at the Montgomery Police Department, I think I've been saying in these airways, one of the most important decisions you're going to make is who you hire as chief. The most important decision you can make. Yeah. And so how is that search going? What is that search like? So the search is going pretty well. We have a national search firm that's very reputable in the people that they bring to the table. The problem is you got a lot of openings for police chiefs. I told somebody recently, I said, police chiefs are now about like superintendents of public schools. The days of them staying 5, 6, 7 years, those days are over. Police chiefs is a grueling job. It's under the spotlight, and you're asked to do more with less in today's environment. And the public is unyielding, whether you're Houston or whether you're Birmingham or Chattanooga. It doesn't matter, or Montgomery. This is the new reality. So the search so far is going pretty well, and I think that by casting a wide net, we'll get a chance to see the best and brightest from around the country, as well as the best and brightest that we have even locally here in our city and in our community. So I'm looking forward to
the process. I'd rather not be in it, but now that we are, it gives us a chance to kind of hit the reset button and take a look at what's happening organizationally, and to see what leadership style and approach is going to be needed. But before we get to that, I want to share with you and your audience. We will, be naming an interim police chief here, and I think that we'll have an interim name in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Where we can, then go about really taking a deeper dive into, again, organizationally what's right and what's wrong, but also in the community what we can do to make our city safer and what we can do to improve the data, but more importantly, I think even the perception.
Well, and I'd imagine you already, there's a lot goes into this, of course, but I'd imagine you already have in mind like a bottom line mission you want a new chief to pursue.
Oh, no question.
What would that mission be?
Well, one, that you got to be strong in recruiting. Again, we got to, what's your approach to not only bringing in new people into the career of law enforcement, but what's your approach and what's been your track record potentially of bringing in people who are already experienced. I mentioned people cannibalizing Montgomery Police Department. That's good. It speaks to the level of training and expertise and professionalism they have, but we may have to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And that happens, right? In the corporate workspace, whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, or a teacher. Well, again, that's in law enforcement as well. The second thing is, do you stand strong around community policing? What are your views on that? That is still a major part of it, which is why we asked the city council, for $6 million in community violence intervention. Mm-hmm. We're not going to handcuff and jail our way out of this scenario. No city has seen drops over the last 2 to 3 years. And then obviously, what's your organizational approach to maintaining morale and maintaining a positive work culture so that those that are committed to the police department and protecting and serving go out and do that with a clear head and with a sense of purpose in what they do. I believe if you have those 3 core things, then we'll have the makings of the right chief and the right leader. Right. But I want to say this too. Aside from those 3 things, there's no perfect chief. There's never been a perfect chief in Montgomery Police Department. Right. There's no perfect law enforcement, no official, no more than there's a perfect mayor. So, we tend to kind of, have wistful memories of the past that weren't so wistful mm-hmm. when you were in them. And I know enough people and having lived here long enough to remember some of the things that aren't said about the police department under certain time frames. So we have to kind of keep those things in mind and keep it balanced as well.
Now, in particular, and I understand if we're not going to get too much detail on this, one of my biggest worries about not having as much, let's say, order mm-hmm. on the streets is especially this recent triple homicide.
Yeah.
And I know you were on the scene there after the fact and are looking into it. My worry is that we're going to have a much bigger problem than, say, anything we have locally. Mm-hmm. That this is going to invite in, say, elements that are all around the country, and maybe we're already here to some degree, but even worse aspects.
Well, I think the response of the police department has been great. I think the response of the community at large has been great. And my communication has not been that we're inviting, elements into the city. My communication has been we want to see something done. So we just saw Councilman Mitchell and others, I think, commit to a high reward for that homicide.
Yeah, $25,000.
$25,000. That number will grow in the next 2 to 3 business days. And I think that as the number grows, I think we'll see leads come in. It's unfortunate, but I think that we'll see solid leads come in where that's concerned. And I think the Latino community wants to know that we have a plan and that we're changing things up. And both of those things are true. And they want to make sure that it's consistent. It's not just, here while it's hot and then it's gone, in a couple of months, that we kind of maintain this. And we're doing that along with making sure that our business partners reach out to kind of help them with some business practices that may make them less of a target, right, if you will, than they are right now.
Yeah, because I think as I started looking into the crime prevention and mm-hmm. intervention programs, I'll admit, when I first saw $6 million more, when I didn't think we had a money issue in terms of getting officers, it was other issues that were causing recruiting. And then I heard you say at the council that it'd be modeled after Chicago, Oakland, Baltimore. my knee-jerk reaction is like, what the heck is this?
Mm-hmm.
As I started looking into it, I had just read before you got here, it was an article written out of Oakland in January of this year, and it was talking about their program called Ceasefire.
Yep.
And it seemed like something in the last couple of years kind of went off the rails. The ceasefire numbers started to go back up in terms of homicides in Oakland. But from about 2012 to 2018, maybe even a little further, you had a massive drop in homicides. And I was trying to understand, what is a crime intervention program?
Yeah.
One part of it that really made me wake up is, okay, I'm thinking of folks who are adjacent to gang activity and they don't want to be part of it. And you were able to help them out, number one. I'm thinking of folks who are maybe in gang activity, but you give them other incentives not to engage in violence against one another. And then for the folks who just don't want to change, this is their life, you have special police units that know how to deal with gang elements and seize guns and these sorts of things. Is this about your understanding of crime intervention?
Yeah, it is. But there's a relationship building aspect of this, and taking people who have been in that life or who are recently out of the criminal justice system, who are really trying to get their lives on the right track, back in communities where they're familiar, and they're able to talk people out of this lifestyle. They're also able to provide those on ramps and say, okay, Mayor, you tell me you got a shortage out here, some of your Hyundai suppliers. Well, my folks don't know how to get those jobs. I can get them out of the game. You can show them they can make money out here. Well, listen, I solved two problems with that, right? I get that young person out of a life that's going to end bad one way or the other, either in jail or with a violent interaction that may be fatal. And I get someone into a career, into a work, a job that they have never seen anyone on their street, in their block doing. And now they see that there's a pathway that does not involve illegal activity. And those are things that our economic development announcements don't cover. Those are things that our public school successes, education successes don't cover. Those are things where you have to have people on the ground, embedded in the community, one by one, not afraid to go in these hot spots and have the sit downs with these who are most at risk to be a part of this behavior. And it's not only been shown to work there. Baltimore has seen steady decreases in the last 3 years, well over 24% cumulatively when you look at their work that they've done. Newark, New Jersey, very similar. And so we tend to hold on sometimes, and it's bad for a city, to things that happened a decade ago. Now, we don't do that with almost anything else, but we do it there. Alabama's the third most dangerous state in the nation. We're not the third most dangerous. We're not even in the top 10 of the most dangerous cities in our state. So we tend to absolve the state of a lot of things, and we tend to hyper-localize the criticism, right? So the question also has to be what's being done at the state level to get us off the top 5, as we're poking fun at big city USA and say, well, as a state, you're the third most violent in the country. So we got to think about, those leaders too, and those policymakers, and not just the mayor and the council, but where are those folks at the higher level that also have some responsibility and culpability in this. And so that's why I look forward to their support. So I look forward to their partnership in this, because these are models that we have researched for probably a year and a half, maybe even a little bit longer, a year and a half, somewhere between a year and a half and 2. And we're ready to implement this, and we feel like we've got the people on board to really go out and carry it to the level that we need to provide the relationships, provide the information, the intervention and prevention, and then certainly to reduce the lack of response when things do happen. Because when you look at some of these non-fatal shootings, and we're down around 7% now year over year. We were higher just before May. May was a very bad month. Hopefully we can get that number back up. But when you look at where we are even in non-fatal shootings, which was a statistic we did not keep up with until I came into office and I asked for it, those are things that we really want to reduce. Is kind of that revenge, that kind of, well, I'm going to retaliate. And when these programs are implemented correctly, those retaliation numbers go down tremendously.
Well, and like one that just shocked me is the 32nd homicide this year. And this is more rhetorical, and we maybe could spend a long time talking about it, but how does a 12-year-old girl get shot at 2 a.m. in Chisholm?
One, again, too many people having too many guns who should not have them. And a 12-year-old girl should not be shot. And what we have to understand is sometimes family members bring trouble onto themselves. That part they know, but the other part they also know is they bring it onto other members of their family or other folks in the community, which is unfortunate. And those are the people who don't have they don't have the option to move to another part of the city. They don't have the financial means to, understand they've got a neighbor. And in some cases, they don't even know how to reach out to us, which again, we have to do a better job of from the city and saying, hey, if you see some things going on, let us know. And we have to make sure that we're there again, not just in the nick of time, but we're there consistently to identify where some of those areas are. But certainly was an unfortunate scenario, and it's something that is we've seen just far too often around the state. It just, it really pains you when you see that.
And again, folks, we're talking to Mayor Stephen L. Reed. There's something that struck me as poignant. You said it on another show here locally, that you were recently at the Morehouse graduation ceremony.
Yeah.
And, you were seeing 400 young black men like yourself who cross that line and are probably going to go on to do all sorts of great things.
Yeah.
And then you said, I have to keep in mind that 95% of these homicides are young black men killing one another.
Yep.
What is that divide? Why is that it's a reality, not just here, but around the nation?
Sure. I think it's a cultural issue. I think it's a lack of regard for life. I think it's a lack of hope, lack of opportunity. And we have to do a better job ourselves modeling, what works, telling our stories. That's why I try to tell, so many people, whether I'm speaking in a venue like this or certainly in person when I'm talking to young people about life being up and down. And, I didn't just get here to this place, in the snap of a finger. Got a lot of friends, got a lot of family that was in different parts of the criminal justice system. And I try to tell that story so that they can see a level of connectivity there, that it doesn't have to be permanent because this is what you've seen, this is what you've done. Now, certainly, I grew up blessed and very much exposed to a lot of great things in this community. Not everyone does. So for those that are on the margins, we have to find ways to reach them earlier. You'll be hearing us talk more about our parks and recreation initiatives as a facet of that. More involvement from our public safety as well, and then just more mentorship from real mentors and from people who really want to get in those spaces to talk to them. And then I'm not putting in any inordinate blame here, but the adults in their lives also have to play a better role than what they're playing. Yeah. And they have to, we can have the Community Violence Intervention Initiative, Together We Rise initiative that we're going to go into more detail on in these next few days. But those closest to these young people have to take some responsibility that says, I care about you enough to show you a different way and to try to connect you to something that is not all that I may have known and all that I may have done. And that takes community, and that takes a lot of us really having those tough conversations, from basketball courts to barbershops to chat groups, to anything else, and making sure we're talking to those young people and we're talking to them about where the opportunities are without wearing a shirt and tie. As I like to tell them, you don't have to wear a shirt and tie. That's not what you like. You don't have to sit in an office if that's not what you like. There are a lot of great ways to be a responsible citizen and to be someone who's a asset to our community than having a title or being in some corporate space. You can do that and be a example and be a mentor to somebody else. And that's what the message we have to get to these young people, and tell them ultimately disagreements are as old as time. How we settle them has been what's changed. And every disagreement doesn't have to be settled with a gun.
Well, amen to that. And some folks have the mentality, if I don't go after him, he's going to come after me first.
Absolutely.
And
far too much.
Yeah. We got to hit a quick break here. When we come back, just to preview the next question, I opened the show laying out in detail this. You mentioned the state earlier, and I know the relationship has been somewhat contentious with the state government on certain things. The proposed legislation pre-filed by State Rep Reed Ingram and State Senator Will Barfoot, and it is essentially gives the ability to the Attorney General or the governor to appoint an interim chief. And so on the other side of the break, I would love to get your reaction. We'll get into that.
Sure.
And in general, the all of government approach, because I think I'm like everybody else been seeing Dr. David Thrasher's emails. I think his number one and the one he sent out is we got to stop pointing fingers. And I think, in fact, to solve a problem like this, it's about right.
Yeah.
Though I would say, Dr. Thrasher, there is always politics, but we'll be right back, folks.
He may not know whether he's coming or going.
Joey Clark.
Welcome back to News and Views in the afternoon. Again, in the studio with me, we have the mayor of Montgomery, Stephen Reed. And where we left off is this recent suggestion of the state intervening in departments. And I think the true linchpin of it is force levels. I mean, they have to take into account crime statistics, but I think the main thing is force level.
Yeah, but the state just started hiring at Aaliyah in the last year and a half. I mean, they might want to take care of their own business before they try to tell mayors how to run cities. You want to run cities, come run cities. But to have two legislators from a town that doesn't have a police department talk about what mayors need to do, I mean, that just strikes me as odd. It really strikes me as a level of irony. That's a better way for me to say it. So, come with some solutions. That's not a solution. Come with some solutions that help cities and that help mayors around this state deal with reckless laws like the permitless carry bill that they passed, and these other unfunded mandates that they hand down to cities and counties that people at the local level don't understand because they don't follow state politics, because so much of it is done, a process that just people don't truly understand. I was a page at the state legislature. I worked in the state senate for lieutenant governor. I was government relations, so I understand that probably better than most, and probably better than most mayors. So I understand how these things work. I just think it's disingenuous for legislators to do that when, again, it smacks me of legislative overreach and preemption of local governments making local decisions. In particular, when you start getting into personnel, that just to me is not the role of the state. And I'm surprised that people who believe in small government, believe in home rule, would propose such legislation.
Why is there a difference? It seems like, for instance, I'll just say it, the Montgomery Sheriff's Department is not having a hiring problem, but MPD is.
Well, PD, I think, is different. Police work and sheriff's work is a little bit different. Two, I think, what the day-to-day job, and I was at the county for 7 years, worked with the sheriff's department every day in my courtroom and every other way. It's different in terms of what that first level of priority is versus what you do in the police department. And that's not just Montgomery. That's, really across the board. I think the other thing is certainly consistency helps. So when you've had a sheriff, and sheriffs tend to stay kind of like judges. Once they get in, they tend to be there for a while. That helps too. You can establish that culture, and I think Sheriff Cunningham has done that. And before him, you had Sheriff D.T. Marshall prior to that. Versus, police chiefs, again, as I said, like superintendents, they don't tend to have that longevity. It's a lot harder to keep that longevity in that police chief role than it is sheriff, in part probably because you're answering to a mayor and you're answering to a city council, and you're in a space where that sheriff has that 6-year term and she's answering, to the people of their county. So a little bit different there. But, the great thing about where we are is, we have the collaboration between the police department, we have the collaboration between the sheriff's office, and we have the collaboration between the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency as well as our federal partners. So there is a level that people may not see and may not recognize
Right.
that the law enforcement community has stepped up in a way that some of the old lines of, hey, this is their jurisdiction versus mine. It's like, hey, let's get the bad guys. Let's make sure people are safe, and we'll figure out the other stuff later. Because at the end of the day, the rank and file person doesn't really care about that. They really want to make sure they're doing the right thing in the best way possible.
Now, do you think there is sufficient cooperation? Kind of what I asked about earlier. I'll name people be familiar with. If MS-13 is trafficking all throughout this corridor, which was 65-85, or other elements, other gang elements, is there good cooperation across law enforcement to handle? Because that's a huge issue.
It is, and we stepped that up over the last 2.5 years, and we have seen success already. We had a law enforcement agency that had never prosecuted a RICO case. Well, that changed in the last 2 years. That's significant because now you're talking about federal charges, and we can do with those folks once they're found guilty. A lot different than if they're just brought up on state charges, right? So we've seen that collaboration, and I think that it is improving, and it has even spanned some of the changes that we've had at MPD, because there's a commitment to make sure that everyone is working together, and there's a commitment to make sure that bad people aren't taking advantage of what's happening in the job market around law enforcement to their benefit. And so there's still work to be done, but we could not ask for more collaboration from our local, state, and federal partners.
Well, and moving more to the law side, because the state legislature can pass a lot of laws that I think would possibly improve situations. Again, I think the number one problem is force levels. And if you can write all the laws you want, if you don't have the people to enforce them in an effective way, it's like a letter to Santa. I hope kids aren't listening. So on the law side, though, is there any need? I'm
going to disagree with you, though, because I'm going to say that part of this issue is the amount of guns that are in communities and how they're in communities. So again, we make these generalities of what's dangerous and what's not, and the type of guns, right?
And how do you get the guns out of those people's hands without a law enforcement element that can take them?
Well, some of it comes down to, again, what's allowed to be sold and to whom. All right, what's allowed? Well, what can we get on a traffic stop? So to your point, certainly force levels there, but some of it is what's allowed on the streets here versus what's allowed and who has access to get it. That's the difference here than other states. And so in some states, we see some stronger gun laws around assault rifles. A little bit different than what we have here in most of the southern states. Those are things that, we also have to factor into this level of violence that we have seen. And I just think there's that along with force levels. But I'll also say that the bail and bonds process plays a role in that. We just picked up somebody again in a shooting who was out for a capital murder charge that they had 3 years ago. So, the judiciary plays a role in this. Our men and women are doing a good job at PD. So I think there's a lot of areas where we can be beneficial. You mentioned Sheriff Cunningham, and I mentioned this in the city council meeting the other day. Right. Sheriff Cunningham, the Alabama Sheriff's Association, the Alabama Police Chiefs Association, the DA's Association, the League of Municipalities, the Alabama Big Ten mayors were all against the permitless carry bill. We all got run over on that. And Sheriff Cunningham is quoted, and I shared that at the council meeting, as saying this is going to put the guns in the hands of people who should not have them. One problem. The Big Ten mayors, collectively, we said this is going to lead to higher homicide rates. Another problem. So these are things that 2 years ago we were talking about, 2.5 years ago we were talking about, were not good ideas, was not good policy as people who have to deal with it and know the backstories of it. The legislature is far enough away from it that they can pass a law and say, hey, we're not responsible. Go talk to your town council or go talk to whomever else. We have to deal with that at the local level. So we also have to, again, make sure that, the same level of interest that we have at a city council meeting, which is great. I welcome people to come to all of them, watch them all. I love seeing the number of views that we have now. I think people knowing more about their local government is better for all of us.
Sure.
Make sure you're doing that with the state legislature, and make sure that you talk to your sheriff, your district attorney, and those representatives when gun laws like these are being passed, because they tend to have a more drastic impact on those of us who are on the ground dealing with it every day than those who come to the state legislature for 30 legislative days out of the year.
Well, and I'll probably ask this question, and I talked to him before the law was passed. I have Kevin Murphy on, Chief Deputy there for the Sheriff's Department folks, on Monday. I'll probably ask him the same thing. But do we have numbers on the effect of permitless carry, or how many guns were taken from people?
Oh, yeah. So
at a random traffic stop?
I can get the stat back to you. I don't have that point, but I mean, we're almost half of guns that we would seize and arrest.
And it seemed
down.
also to me that the homicide rate went up in this city and across the nation before that was passed, too.
Well, listen, in this city, which is my primary concern, you saw that jump, all right? So, and you also saw non-fatal shootings jump from 21, 22, you look at 23, and now getting into 24. So therein lies a correlation from my standpoint in terms of what we're seeing here. Again, other cities have been able to have more preventative measures. So we've seen some of those things kind of go up and down. We just started Office of Violence Prevention, which we fund at $600,000, and it probably should be at a few million, because it was kind of a trial run here, and I think they've done a great job. But we don't have near what we should have for a city of size, which is again why we're making that ask. Yeah,
and on the bond bail issue, what sort of improvements to that system? I've heard some saying keeping maybe the bail companies have some liability. Like, what are you imagining that could strengthen that system, where if you're committing a heinous crime in Montgomery, you're not going to be back out on the street?
I think that we have a very strong state legislative delegation. And again, I think that's also why, Representative Ingram and Senator Barfoot would have done well to talk to our other members of our local delegation to come up with solutions, and not a wide-ranging state bill that impacts mayors from Madison to Mobile. I think that they, along with our judiciary and our DAs, can help us find a solution where bails and bonds are concerned. I understand the old practice of, bonds being so high that people who are economically and financially challenged could not get out. So we have to find out, all right, was there an overcorrection? And that's a question, not a statement. And if there was, then how do we address that for someone who's a repeat violent offender? Now, we're not talking about your low-level drug user. I'm not talking about that person. We're talking about how do we address the repeat shooters and somebody that is brought out on a capital murder charge and then can get out and be out for 2 to 3 years, and we're picking them right back up. That is a problem. And ideally, through these initiatives and programs, we reach that person, that at-risk person, earlier to keep them off that path. But if we cannot, then we cannot have them back in the streets and the communities where people now have to feel afraid.
And final question, and I'm running out of time here. I know you got other interviews, other things to do. And I'll zoom out. And this is more, I guess, the political divide, the ideological divide that exists in our country. Sometimes when I hear more liberal folks, and the best of them, I'll put it that way. I'm not talking about the usual partisan BS that goes on with people, but the best of them. It seems like there's an acceptance, like Chicago has a plan that 50% reduction in the homicide rate in the next 5 years, something like that. I'm like, why isn't the goal 100%?
My goal is always 100%. My goal is that no one is shot, maimed, or killed all the way through. I think, we certainly are practical about that. And the goal is you got to start somewhere, and you want to start aggressive. You want to start with something that is, measurable and something that I guess is realistic, right? But that is always the goal, is to eliminate these things, these issues. And again, it's not even just to pick on, the big city or the mid-sized city, any community that is seeing it, relative to its size, you want to see them get help. And so when I look around the state of Alabama and I see cities, having these challenges in law enforcement, you want to figure out a way you can help them as you try to help yourself in your own community, because what that mayor, what that police chief or that sheriff or those police officers are dealing with, and certainly the people that live there.
It's just sometimes it sounds to me like this. People would say this is the cost of freedom. This is sort of like if you're going to protect human rights. It reminds me of the old Camille Paglia line that liberals and a lot of different types of liberals see the government as a tyrant father, but want it to be a nurturing mother. And I think I worry sometimes the therapeutic approach, which looking into it just a little bit last night, I think there's a lot of stuff that makes sense with the crime intervention. But there are times where there are some folks that are intractable, and
we agree.
You don't do these things on our street.
Yeah, no. We agree on that all the way. And again, I don't think you have to replace one for the other. What we have not had in this city ever has been a fully funded effort towards community violence intervention. We just have played reactionary style of law and order, and that's not the way to bring down these rates, and that's not the way to make our communities safer.
Well, we're pretty much out of time here. I appreciate your time. We do need to do this monthly. Now, we said this in January.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I can't believe when you said that. I hadn't been here since January. I mean, I've been busy, but I didn't know it had been near that long. So, yeah, we'll get on a better schedule, because we got to talk about the good news, too. We didn't talk about Meta. We didn't talk about some of the great things that are happening in the city and in this community. So we got to make sure we share that good news. And hey, U.S. News and World Reports has us the second best city in Alabama, up 40 spots. All right. Share that good news with the folks.
Well, and I asked Andrew Szymanski yesterday, are we going to get rid of twice a week pickup? And he just went away from the camera and all this stuff. So no, anytime you want to come back.
The council. Yeah, that's one of theirs. All right.
Well, appreciate you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
We'll be right back, folks.
Want to carry news